The barbed wire glinted like a snake's warning in the harsh Texas sun, and Lucas Vance knew that cutting through it tonight might cost him everything except the one thing he refused to lose. It was June of 1883, and the open range was dying. Lucas stood in the dusty street of Red River, New Mexico, watching as another freight wagon rolled past loaded with more spools of that damned wire. His jaw tightened beneath the shadow of his hat brim. For 3 generations, the Vance family had driven cattle across this land, following the grass and water as God intended. Now, ranchers were carving up the territory like a Sunday roast, stringing fences that cut off ancient trails and watering holes. His father had built their ranch on the principles of the open range. Cattle roamed free, grazing where they would, and cowboys drove them to market using trails worn deep by thousands of hooves over decades. But men like Jessica Van der Berg saw things differently. The big landowners wanted control, wanted to fence in their holdings and keep everyone else out. Never mind that it strangled the smaller operations. Never mind that it went against everything the West had been built on. Lucas was 24 years old, lean and strong from years of hard work under the sun. His hands were calloused from rope and leather, his eyes sharp from reading the land and sky. He had grown up believing in fairness and honest labor, and what he saw happening now burned in his gut like bad whiskey. He walked into the general store, nodding to Mrs. Patterson behind the counter. The smell of coffee and new leather filled his nose as he moved between the shelves, picking up supplies for the ranch. That was when he saw her. Jessica Van der Berg stood near the bolts of fabric, running her fingers over a deep blue calico. She was beautiful in a way that made Lucas forget to breathe. Her dark hair was pinned up beneath a practical bonnet, but loose curls escaped to frame her face. She was perhaps 22, with eyes the color of spring sage and a bearing that spoke of both strength and grace. He had seen her around town before, always from a distance, always knowing that she was absolutely off limits. She was Jessica Van der Berg's daughter. The enemy. Their eyes met across the store and something passed between them that Lucas could not name. It was not the first glance of strangers. It felt like recognition, like something inevitable clicking into place. Jessica's lips parted slightly, and a faint color rose in her cheeks before she looked away. Lucas forced himself to focus on his purchases. He gathered ammunition, coffee, and salt pork, carrying them to the counter. He was acutely aware of Jessica's presence, of the rustle of her skirts as she moved through the store. When he glanced back, she was examining a display of ribbons with an intensity that seemed forced. "That will be $3.40, Mrs. Patterson said. Lucas paid and gathered his goods, but as he turned to leave, he nearly collided with Jessica. She had approached the counter with her selections, and they stood face to face, close enough that he caught the faint scent of lavender. "Pardon me, miss," he said, stepping aside. "No harm done," she replied. Her voice was softer than he expected, with an educated quality that reminded him she had been sent east for schooling. But there was warmth there too, not the cold superiority he might have expected from Van der Berg's daughter. Their eyes met again, and this time neither looked away immediately. Lucas felt his heart hammer in his chest. Up close, she was even more striking. There was intelligence in her gaze and something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe the same inexplicable pull he felt. "Lucas Vance, is it not?" she asked. He was surprised she knew his name. "Yes, madam, and you are Miss Van der Berg." "Jessica," she said, then seemed to catch herself. "That is, yes, Miss Van der Berg." An awkward silence stretched between them. "Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat pointedly, and Jessica stepped forward to conduct her business. Lucas knew he should leave, but his feet seemed rooted to the floor. "I hope you have a good day, Mr. Vance," Jessica said without looking at him as she counted out coins. "Same to you, Miss Van der Berg," he replied, and finally forced himself to walk out into the blazing afternoon. He loaded his supplies into his saddlebags and swung up onto his horse, a sturdy buckskin named Ranger. But before he could ride off, he caught sight of Jessica emerging from the store with a wrapped package. She walked with purpose toward a buggy where an older woman waited, presumably a housekeeper or companion. As if sensing his gaze, Jessica turned and looked directly at him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the dusty street. Then she climbed into the buggy and was gone. Lucas rode back to the Vance ranch with his mind in turmoil. He had no business thinking about Jessica Van der Berg. Their families were on opposite sides of a conflict that was growing uglier by the day. Just last week, someone had cut the fences on the Van der Berg property, letting cattle wander through. Ezra Van der Berg had sworn vengeance, promising to prosecute anyone caught damaging his fences to the full extent of the law. The Vance ranch was modest compared to Van der Berg's sprawling empire, but it was home. The ranch house was built of adobe and timber, weathered but solid. Corrals held their horses and a small herd of cattle grazed in the distance. Lucas's father, Michael Vance, was in the barn when Lucas arrived. "Get everything we needed?" Michael asked, looking up from the saddle he was mending. "Yes, sir," Lucas said, dismounting and beginning to unload the supplies. Michael Vance was in his 50s, a man carved from hard years and harder decisions. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and lines creased his weathered face, but his eyes were still sharp and his hands still steady. "Saw more wire being delivered," Lucas said carefully. His father's expression darkened. "Van der Berg is fencing off Cottonwood Creek. That water has been open to everyone since before he ever set foot in this territory." Lucas felt his anger flare fresh. Cottonwood Creek was vital to several smaller ranches, including theirs. Losing access to it in the hot months could devastate their cattle. "That is not legal, is it? That water source has been used by everyone for decades." "Legal is what men with money and lawyers say it is," Michael said bitterly. "Van der Berg has both. We have neither." That night, Lucas lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling. He thought about the fences choking the land. He thought about his father's worried face and the smaller ranchers who would be ruined if this continued. And despite himself, he thought about Jessica Van der Berg's sage green eyes and the way she had said his name. He must have eventually slept because he woke to his father shaking his shoulder in the gray light before dawn. "Get dressed," Michael said. "We have got trouble." Lucas pulled on his clothes and boots and followed his father outside. 3 of their neighbors were there on horseback, looking grim. Tom Richardson, Pete Harmon, and young Billy Crawford. "They have cut us off completely," Tom said without preamble. "Van der Berg finished fencing Cottonwood Creek last night. No access at all. He has posted guards." "Guards," Lucas said sharply. 2 men with rifles, Pete confirmed. "Making it clear we are not welcome on what they are calling Van der Berg property now." Lucas looked at his father and saw the defeat beginning to settle into the older man's features. That look scared him more than any threat. "We can take this to the territorial authorities," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "By the time they do anything, if they do anything, our cattle will be dead or we will be ruined," Tom said. "You know how this works, Michael. The big ranchers are consolidating power. They want to squeeze us out and take over everything." "So what are you proposing?" Michael asked, though Lucas suspected he already knew. "Some of the boys are organizing," Billy said. He was only 19, hot-headed and eager. "Tonight. We are cutting those fences and making it clear that the open range belongs to everyone." "That is illegal," Michael said. "Van der Berg will have the law on anyone he catches." "Then we do not get caught," Tom replied. "Are you with us or not?" Lucas watched his father struggle with the decision. Michael Vance was a law-abiding man, but he was also a man who had worked this land for 30 years. Finally, Michael shook his head. "I cannot condone fence cutting, but I will not stop you either. Every man has to make his own choice." The three neighbors looked at Lucas. "What about you, Luke? You are young and quick. We could use you." Lucas felt the weight of the moment. If he went with them, he would be breaking the law. He could be arrested, imprisoned. But if he did nothing, he would watch his family and neighbors lose everything. "I will ride with you," he said. His father closed his eyes briefly but said nothing. They made their plans quickly. 12 men would gather after midnight at the old line shack near Cottonwood Creek. They would cut the fences, drive the posts down, and make passage for the cattle. It would be fast and quiet. Lucas spent the day working around the ranch, but his mind was elsewhere. He checked his wire cutters, made sure his horse was ready, and tried not to think about what could go wrong. But more than the danger, he found himself thinking about Jessica. Would she hate him for what he was about to do? Did it matter? It should not matter. He barely knew her. But something in him rebelled at the idea of becoming her enemy. Dusk fell across the high desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Lucas ate a quiet dinner with his father, neither of them speaking much. When full darkness came, Lucas saddled Ranger and checked his gear. "Be careful," Michael said from the barn door. "Do not let them see your face. Do not take unnecessary risks." "I will be careful," Lucas promised. He rode out into the night, following familiar trails by starlight. The air was cooler now, pleasant after the heat of the day. Crickets sang in the sage, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. The line shack was a crude structure of wood and stone, barely visible in the darkness. Lucas counted 11 horses already there when he arrived. The men were shadows and low voices, faces hidden beneath hat brims and bandanas. Tom Richardson seemed to be leading the group. "Everyone knows what to do. We work fast and quiet. Cut the wire, pull the posts, and scatter. If anyone spots trouble, you ride hard and do not look back. No heroes, no fighting." "Understood." A murmur of agreement went through the group. They rode in silence toward Cottonwood Creek. Lucas's heart pounded as they approached the fence line. It was an ugly thing, that barbed wire. 4 strands of it stretched tight between posts that marched across the land like an invading army. In the moonlight, the barbs looked like tiny claws, holding the land hostage. They split into pairs, each taking a section of fence. Lucas worked with Pete Harmon, using their wire cutters to snap through the strands. The wire sang as it broke, coiling back with dangerous energy. They worked methodically, cutting and pulling until they had cleared 100 yards of fence. Lucas was cutting the last strand when he heard the shout. "Riders coming, Van der Berg men." He looked up and saw torches in the distance moving fast toward them. His stomach dropped. "Scatter," Tom yelled. The fence cutters scrambled for their horses. Lucas vaulted into his saddle and wheeled Ranger around. The Van der Berg men were closer than he had thought, close enough that he could hear their horses thundering across the hard ground. "Stop right there. This is Van der Berg property," a man shouted. Lucas did not stop. He leaned low over Ranger's neck and gave the horse his head. Ranger was fast and sure-footed, dodging between clumps of sage and leaping a dry wash without breaking stride. Behind him, Lucas heard more shouts and the crack of a gunshot. His blood ran cold, but he kept riding. He did not know if they were shooting to kill or just to scare, and he did not want to find out. He rode hard for 20 minutes, taking a winding route through terrain he knew well. Finally, when he was certain no one was following, he slowed Ranger to a walk and let the horse catch his breath. His hands were shaking. They had done it. They had cut the fences. But Van der Berg's men had seen them, and even with bandanas covering their faces, there was a risk someone had been recognized. Lucas made his way home by a circuitous route, approaching the ranch from the east. He unsaddled Ranger and rubbed the horse down thoroughly before turning him out. The ranch house was dark when he slipped inside and fell into bed, still fully clothed. He woke to pounding on the door. Sunlight streamed through the window. Lucas sat up, disoriented, and heard his father's voice and another man's, raised in argument. He pulled on his boots and stumbled into the main room. A man wearing a deputy's badge stood in the doorway. Lucas recognized him as Carl Morrison, a man who owed his position more to Van der Berg's influence than to any qualification. "I am telling you, Michael, we have witnesses who saw your son with the fence cutters last night," Morrison was saying. "That is a lie," Michael said. "Lucas was here all night." Morrison's eyes shifted to Lucas. "That true, boy? You were here all night?" Lucas met the deputy's gaze steadily. "I was here all night." "We will see what a judge says about that," Morrison replied. "Ezra Van der Berg is pressing charges against everyone involved. Destruction of property, trespassing, conspiracy. You boys are in serious trouble." "You have no proof," Michael said. "We will get proof, and when we do, your boy is looking at prison time." Morrison tipped his hat in mock courtesy. "Have a good day, gentlemen." After he left, Michael turned to Lucas with a pained expression. "Did they see you?" "I do not think so. We all had our faces covered. But they know who was there. In a territory this size, it is not hard to figure out." Michael sank into a chair. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." He was right. Over the next week, tensions in Red River escalated dramatically. Van der Berg hired more guards and restrung his fences even stronger than before. The fence cutters struck again, and this time someone on Van der Berg's side was shot and wounded. No one knew who fired the shot, but it transformed the conflict from property dispute to something far more dangerous. Lucas went into town for supplies and found the place divided. Businesses that catered to the big ranchers would not serve the smaller operators. Friends became enemies overnight. And through it all, Lucas caught glimpses of Jessica Van der Berg, always at a distance, always unreachable. He told himself it was better that way. She was the daughter of the man trying to destroy everything Lucas cared about. There could be nothing between them, but fate, it seemed, had other ideas. It was a Saturday afternoon when Lucas finished his business in town and headed for his horse. The street was crowded with wagons and people, and he was navigating through the throng when he heard a woman scream. He turned and saw a runaway horse and wagon careening down the main street. People scattered, and Lucas caught a glimpse of Jessica Van der Berg clinging to the bench seat, her face pale with fear as the horse bolted out of control. Lucas did not think. He ran for Ranger, swung into the saddle, and spurred the buckskin into a gallop. They intercepted the runaway wagon at the edge of town, and Lucas brought Ranger alongside the panicked horse. He reached out and grabbed the harness, using Ranger's weight and strength to slow the runaway. It took all of Lucas's skill and strength, but gradually the frightened horse slowed from a gallop to a canter to a rough trot and finally to a trembling stop. Lucas held tight to the harness, speaking in a low, steady voice to calm the animal. "Easy now, easy. You are all right. Nobody is hurt." Once he was sure the horse would not bolt again, Lucas turned his attention to Jessica. She was still gripping the bench seat, her knuckles white. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked. She shook her head, but he could see she was shaking. "I am all right. Something spooked him. I could not hold him." Lucas dismounted and came around to help her down from the wagon. When she took his hand, he felt that same jolt of connection he had felt in the general store. Her hand was small in his, but her grip was firm. "That was very brave," she said once her feet were on solid ground. "You could have been trampled." "Could not stand by and watch someone get hurt," Lucas said. A crowd had gathered, and Lucas became aware of people staring. He also became aware that he was still holding Jessica's hand. He released it quickly, but not before he saw recognition in several faces. This would be all over town by nightfall. Lucas Vance saving Ezra Van der Berg's daughter. "I should check your horse," Lucas said, moving to examine the animal. The horse was still agitated, eyes rolling, but seemed uninjured. Lucas found a hornet's nest under the wagon seat. "Here is your culprit." "Hornet got him, I would wager." "Thank you, Mr. Vance," Jessica said. "I am in your debt." "No debt, Miss Van der Berg. Anyone would have done the same." "But you did it," she said, and there was something in her eyes that made his heart race. Before he could respond, a commotion broke out. Ezra Van der Berg himself was pushing through the crowd, his face dark with concern and then with anger when he saw Lucas. "Jessica, are you harmed?" Van der Berg demanded. "I am fine, Father. Mr. Vance saved me from what could have been a serious accident." Van der Berg looked at Lucas with an expression that mixed grudging gratitude with deep suspicion. He was a tall man in his 50s, with silver hair and cold blue eyes. Everything about him spoke of power and control. "Then I suppose I owe you thanks," Van der Berg said stiffly. "Though I find it curious that you happen to be so conveniently nearby." The implication was clear and insulting. Lucas felt his temper flare. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with your daughter's horse bolting?" "I am suggesting that your family and your associates have been causing me considerable trouble lately," Van der Berg said. "Forgive me if I find coincidence suspicious." "Father, please," Jessica said. "Mr. Vance acted heroically. There is no cause for suspicion." Van der Berg ignored her. "Stay away from my daughter, Vance. You and your fence-cutting friends have caused enough damage." Lucas met the older man's glare with one of his own. "I have done nothing illegal, Mr. Van der Berg. And your fences are choking out honest ranchers who have been working this land longer than you have owned it. The land I have fenced is mine, purchased legally and fairly. If you cannot accept the changing times, perhaps you should find somewhere else to make your living." "This is my home," Lucas said quietly. "My family built our ranch with honest sweat and labor. We are not going anywhere." "We shall see about that," Van der Berg said. He turned to his daughter. "Come, Jessica, we are leaving." Jessica looked at Lucas, and in her eyes he saw an apology and something more. Then she allowed her father to lead her away to his carriage. Lucas stood in the street, aware of the whispers around him. He had just made a powerful enemy angrier, but he could not bring himself to regret it. That night, Lucas could not sleep. He kept replaying the moment when he had helped Jessica down from the wagon, the feel of her hand in his, the way she had looked at him. It was madness to think about her this way. She was Van der Berg's daughter, and the war between their families was growing uglier every day. But he could not get her out of his mind. 3 days later, Lucas was checking fence lines on the far edge of their property when he saw a rider approaching. His hand moved instinctively to his rifle, but he relaxed when he recognized the horse. It was Jessica Van der Berg, riding alone. She was dressed practically in a divided riding skirt and simple blouse, her hair in a braid down her back. She rode well, Lucas noted, sitting her horse with easy confidence. "Miss Van der Berg," he said, genuinely surprised. "This is unexpected." She reined in a few feet away from him. "I hope I am not intruding. I wanted to thank you properly for the other day." "My father was quite rude and you deserved better." "No thanks necessary," Lucas said. "I did what anyone would do." Not anyone, Jessica said. Not everyone would risk themselves for a stranger, especially not when that stranger's father is their enemy. Lucas dismounted and stood looking up at her. You are not your father. No, she agreed. I am not. She dismounted as well, moving with unconscious grace. They stood facing each other in the vast emptiness of the New Mexico landscape, two people who should not be meeting but somehow could not help themselves. This whole situation is terrible, Jessica said. The fence cutting, the threats, people choosing sides. My father believes he is protecting his investment, but I see what it is doing to the smaller ranchers, to families like yours. Lucas was surprised by her candor. Your father does not strike me as a man who listens to dissenting opinions, even from his daughter. He does not, Jessica admitted. He believes the world is changing, and that those who do not change with it will be left behind. He thinks fencing the range is progress. Progress that destroys people's livelihoods, Lucas said. My father has ranched this land for 30 years. He relies on access to water sources that your father is now claiming as private property. How is that fair? It is not, Jessica said softly, but fairness and legality are not always the same thing. They stood in silence for a moment. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents. The air smelled of sage and sun-warmed earth. Why did you really come here? Lucas asked. Jessica met his gaze directly. Because I cannot stop thinking about you. The honesty of it struck Lucas like a physical blow. He saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes, that same impossible attraction, that same sense of inevitability. This cannot work, he said, though the words cost him. Our families are enemies. Your father would never accept me, and my father would see it as a betrayal. I know, Jessica said. But I had to see you anyway. I had to know if what I felt when you saved me was real or just gratitude. And now I know it is real, she said, and it terrifies me. Lucas took a step closer. Terrifies you why? Because I do not know what to do with this feeling. Because everything about it is impossible. Because despite all of that, I still rode out here hoping to find you. Lucas reached out and took her hand, the same way he had when helping her from the wagon, but this time there was no crowd, no pretense. It was just the two of them and the truth hanging in the air between them. I cannot stop thinking about you either, he admitted. From the first moment I saw you in the general store, and I know it is wrong and impossible and foolish, but it does not change what I feel. Jessica's eyes shone with unshed tears. What do we do? I do not know, Lucas said honestly, but I cannot walk away from this, from you. She moved closer and he could feel the warmth of her, smell the faint scent of lavender that seemed to follow her. Then we find a way, somehow. They stood there holding hands like teenagers, both knowing the risk they were taking but unable to care. Finally, reluctantly, they stepped apart. I should go, Jessica said. If my father discovers I came here, he will be furious. When can I see you again? Lucas asked. There is a church social next Saturday, Jessica said. It is neutral ground. Everyone will be there. I will find you there, Lucas promised. She mounted her horse, and he watched her ride away until she was just a distant speck on the horizon. His heart felt both lighter and heavier than it had in months. The week that followed was tense. More fences were cut, and Van der Berg posted armed guards at all his fence lines. The territorial marshal came through Red River, warning both sides that violence would not be tolerated. But everyone knew his authority was limited, and his resources stretched thin. Lucas threw himself into work, helping his father repair a damaged windmill and moving cattle to better grazing. But every night he lay awake thinking of Jessica, counting the hours until Saturday. When Saturday finally arrived, Lucas bathed and dressed in his best clothes. His father noticed but said nothing, though Lucas caught the worried look in his eyes. The church social was held in a grove of cottonwoods on the edge of town, where tables had been set up with food and drink. It seemed like half the territory had turned out. Lucas saw Van der Berg's men on one side and the fence cutters on the other, eyeing each other with open hostility. But the presence of women and children and the minister kept things civil. Lucas spotted Jessica almost immediately. She wore a green dress that matched her eyes, and her hair was pinned up in an elaborate style. She was talking with other young women, but her eyes scanned the crowd, searching. When their eyes met, the rest of the world seemed to fall away. Lucas made his way through the crowd, accepting greetings from neighbors but never taking his eyes off Jessica for long. He could not approach her directly, not with her father watching from across the grove and half the town ready to gossip. But as the afternoon wore on, Lucas found his opportunity. A group was forming to play horseshoes, and Jessica drifted toward the shade of the cottonwoods, ostensibly to escape the heat. Lucas followed at a discreet distance. When he was sure no one was watching too closely, he slipped into the trees where Jessica waited. "I was afraid you would not come," she said. "I would ride through fire to see you," Lucas said, and meant it. They walked deeper into the trees where the sound of the social faded to a distant murmur. Here, hidden from view, they could finally talk freely. "My father is planning something," Jessica said. "I heard him talking with his foreman. They are going to start pressing charges against the fence cutters. They have been gathering evidence, testimony from the guards." Lucas felt a chill. Did he mention any names? "Not specifically, but Lucas, if they have proof against you, you could go to prison." "I know the risks," Lucas said, "but I cannot stand by and watch my family lose everything." "There has to be another way," Jessica insisted. "Some way to resolve this without more violence or people being arrested. Your father is not interested in compromise. He wants total control." "Let me talk to him," Jessica said. "Let me try to make him see reason." Lucas shook his head. "He will not listen, and it will only make him suspicious of you." "I have to try," Jessica said. "I cannot watch this conflict destroy everything and everyone." Lucas took her hands in his. "Jessica, if your father even suspects that you have feelings for me, he will lock you away. I cannot let you risk that. What we risk is losing each other before we even have a chance," Jessica said. "I would rather try and fail than never try at all." Standing there in the dappled shade of the cottonwoods, Lucas made a decision. He leaned forward and kissed her, gently at first, then with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks. Jessica melted into him, her arms going around his neck, and for a perfect moment nothing else existed. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I am falling in love with you," Lucas said. "I know it is fast and crazy and impossible, but it is the truth." "I am falling in love with you too," Jessica whispered. "What are we going to do?" "We are going to figure this out," Lucas said with more confidence than he felt. "Together." They emerged from the trees separately, careful not to be seen together. But Lucas felt changed, as if something fundamental had shifted in the world. Whatever came next, he knew he could not give Jessica up. He would find a way to make this work, no matter the cost. The following week brought disaster. Deputy Morrison and a federal marshal arrived at the Vance ranch with arrest warrants. Tom Richardson had been identified by one of Van der Berg's guards and, under pressure, had named the others involved in the fence cutting. Lucas was arrested along with 5 other men. They were taken to the small jailhouse in Red River, charged with destruction of property and criminal conspiracy. Bail was set impossibly high, ensuring they would remain in custody until trial. The cell was small and hot, with 4 bunks and a barred window. Lucas shared it with Tom and 2 others, while the remaining men were in the adjacent cell. The reality of his situation settled over Lucas like a weight. If convicted, he could face years in prison. His father came to visit, looking older and more worn than Lucas had ever seen him. "The lawyer says it does not look good," Michael said through the bars. "Van der Berg has witnesses and evidence. They are making an example of you boys." "I am sorry, Pa," Lucas said. "I thought we were doing the right thing." "You were standing up for what you believe in," Michael said. "I cannot fault you for that. But son, they are talking about 5 years in territorial prison." 5 years. Lucas felt sick. 5 years of his life gone. 5 years while the ranch fell apart without his labor. 5 years away from Jessica. "Is there any word from the Van der Berg ranch?" Lucas asked, trying to sound casual. Michael gave him a sharp look. "Why would there be?" "Lucas, tell me you have not done something foolish where Ezra Van der Berg's daughter is concerned." Lucas said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. "Lord help us," Michael said. "Son, that girl is poison for you. Even if by some miracle you get out of this, taking up with her would destroy you." "She is not what you think," Lucas said. "She does not support what her father is doing. It does not matter what she supports. She is a Van der Berg, and you are about to go on trial for crimes against her father. There is no future there." After his father left, Lucas lay on his bunk and stared at the ceiling. The days blurred together. His trial was set for 3 weeks away. The lawyer his father hired was well-meaning but overworked and underfunded. Against Van der Berg's expensive legal team, he did not stand much chance. Lucas had been in jail for a week when the guard came and said he had a visitor. Lucas expected his father again, but instead he was led to the small visiting room to find Jessica waiting. She looked tired and worried, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. They sat on opposite sides of a wooden table, unable to touch, with the guard watching from the doorway. "I only have a few minutes," Jessica said quietly. "I told my father I was visiting the sick with the church ladies." "You should not have come," Lucas said, though his heart soared at seeing her. "If he finds out, you will be in trouble." "I do not care," Jessica said fiercely. "Lucas, I have been trying to talk to my father to make him drop the charges, but he will not listen. He says he has to make an example, that the fence cutting has to stop." "He is right about that," Lucas said bitterly. "We lost. His fences are staying up and we are going to prison." "No," Jessica said. "I will not accept that. There has to be something we can do." "Unless you can convince your father to drop the charges, there is nothing," Lucas said. "And we both know he will not do that." Jessica leaned forward, her voice urgent. "What if there was a way to resolve the water rights issue? If the smaller ranchers had legal access to Cottonwood Creek, would that be enough to end this?" Lucas considered. "It would help, but your father will never agree to that. He wants full control of his property." "What if he could be convinced that it is in his best interest?" Jessica asked. "That sharing water access would bring peace and stability, which is better for business than constant conflict." "How would you convince him of that?" "Leave that to me," Jessica said. "But Lucas, I need you to promise me something. No more fence cutting. No more lawlessness. Even if my father does not compromise, you have to promise me you will stop." Lucas wanted to argue, but looking into her eyes, he knew she was right. The fence cutting had only made things worse. It had gotten him and his friends arrested and had not solved anything. "I promise," he said. No more fence cutting. The guard indicated their time was up. Jessica stood reluctantly. "I will find a way to fix this," she said. "Trust me." "I trust you," Lucas said. "But Jessica, be careful. Do not sacrifice yourself for me." "You are worth any sacrifice," she said, and then she was gone. Lucas returned to his cell with a flicker of hope, though he did not dare let it grow too bright. He had learned that hope could be a cruel thing, but Jessica was true to her word. Over the next week, strange things began to happen. The territorial governor paid an unexpected visit to Red River, meeting with both Van der Berg and representatives of the smaller ranchers. Editorials appeared in the Santa Fe newspaper about the range wars and the need for compromise. A lawyer from Denver arrived and began filing motions on behalf of the imprisoned men. Lucas pieced together what was happening from his father's visits and overheard conversations between guards. Jessica had somehow mobilized forces that even Van der Berg could not ignore. She had written to the governor, to newspaper editors, to territorial officials. She had laid out the case for shared water access and negotiated grazing rights. She had used her education and her connections and her stubborn determination to force her father to the bargaining table. 2 weeks after Lucas's arrest, the cell door opened and Deputy Morrison announced that Lucas was being released. The charges were being dropped as part of a settlement agreement. Lucas could hardly believe it. He was led out of the jail into the blazing sunlight where his father waited with the buckboard. Tom Richardson and the other men were being released as well, all of them blinking in disbelief at their sudden freedom. "What happened?" Lucas asked as he climbed onto the buckboard. "A miracle," Michael said. "Or maybe just a very determined young woman. Van der Berg has agreed to allow shared access to Cottonwood Creek and 3 other water sources. In exchange, the smaller ranchers have agreed to respect his fence lines everywhere else and to pay a nominal fee for the water access." "Jessica did this," Lucas said. "She did," Michael confirmed. "Against her father's wishes, from what I hear. There was a terrible row at the Van der Berg ranch." Half the town heard the shouting. Lucas's relief at being free was tempered by worry for Jessica. "Is she all right?" "I do not know, son. But you should know that this settlement came at a price. Van der Berg made it clear that any violation of the agreement will result in immediate prosecution. And he is sending Jessica away back east to stay with relatives. Apparently, he does not trust her here anymore." Lucas felt like he had been punched in the gut. When? "The stage leaves tomorrow morning." Lucas did not remember the ride back to the ranch. His mind was reeling. Jessica had saved him, saved all of them, but at the cost of her own freedom. Van der Berg was exiling her, getting her away from Lucas and the influence she might have on future negotiations. He could not let her leave without seeing her, without telling her how he felt. But Van der Berg would have her guarded, would make sure Lucas could not get near her, unless he did something drastic. That night, Lucas made his preparations carefully. He told his father he was going to check the cattle, saddled Ranger, and rode toward the Van der Berg ranch under cover of darkness. The ranch was impressive, a sprawling complex of buildings surrounded by white-painted fences. Lights burned in the main house, a 2-story structure that spoke of wealth and permanence. Lucas had no idea which room was Jessica's, but he had a plan. He dismounted in a grove of trees 100 yards from the house and crept closer on foot. The Van der Berg ranch hands would shoot first and ask questions later if they caught him. So he moved with extreme caution. He picked up a handful of pebbles and began tossing them at the 2nd-story windows, praying he would hit the right one before someone noticed. On his 5th throw, a window opened and Jessica's face appeared, pale in the moonlight. Her eyes widened when she saw him in the shadows below. She put a finger to her lips and disappeared from the window. A few agonizing minutes later, the back door of the house opened and Jessica slipped out, wrapped in a shawl. They met in the shadows of the barn, and Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "You should not have come," Jessica whispered. "If my father catches you here, he will kill you." "I had to see you," Lucas said. "I heard he is sending you away." "Tomorrow on the morning stage," Jessica confirmed. "He says I have betrayed him and the family. He is sending me to Boston to live with my aunt until I come to my senses. Do not go, Lucas said desperately. Stay here. We can figure this out together. If I stay, he will lock me in my room and guard me day and night, Jessica said, and all the work we did to bring peace will be for nothing. He is angry enough that he might tear up the agreement just to spite me. Lucas knew she was right, but the thought of losing her was unbearable. Then I will come with you, we will go to Boston together. And abandon your family, your ranch, everything you have worked for, Jessica shook her head. I will not let you do that. Then what do we do? Lucas asked. There has to be a way. Jessica took his face in her hands. You stay here and you honor the agreement we worked so hard to achieve. You help your father with the ranch and you prove that compromise and peace are possible. And I go to Boston and I learn everything I can about law and business and how to fight men like my father on their own terms. For how long? I do not know, Jessica admitted. But Lucas, I promise you this, I will come back. And when I do, I will be strong enough and smart enough that not even my father will be able to keep us apart. I cannot wait years for you, Lucas said, though even as he said it, he knew he would. He would wait forever if he had to. You may not have to, Jessica said. My aunt is more liberal-minded than my father. She may be sympathetic to our situation. And Boston is not the end of the world. We can write. We can find ways to communicate. Lucas kissed her then, pouring all his love and longing and desperation into it. She kissed him back with equal intensity, and they clung to each other in the darkness, two people fighting against forces that wanted to tear them apart. I love you, Lucas said when they finally broke apart. I do not care how impossible this is. I love you and I will wait for you. I love you too, Jessica said, and I will come back to you, I swear it. They heard voices from the house, someone calling Jessica's name. She tensed in his arms. You have to go, she said urgently. Please, Lucas, go now before they find you. He kissed her one more time, quick and hard, then slipped back into the shadows. He made his way back to Ranger and rode home, his heart breaking with every step the horse took away from her. The next morning, Lucas stood in the dusty street and watched the stagecoach pull away, carrying Jessica toward a new life in Boston. She sat inside, her face pale behind the window glass. Their eyes met as the stage rolled past, and Lucas saw his own heartbreak reflected in her gaze. Then she was gone, and Lucas was left standing alone in the street, wondering if he would ever see her again. The months that followed were the hardest of Lucas's life. He threw himself into work on the ranch, spending long days under the brutal sun, pushing himself to exhaustion so he would not have time to think or feel. The peace agreement held, and slowly, grudgingly, the ranchers on both sides began to honor it. But Lucas felt hollow inside, like part of him had been torn away when Jessica left. Letters began arriving 3 weeks after her departure. Jessica wrote about Boston, about her aunt's fine house, and the bustle of the city. She wrote about the law lectures she was attending at the university, sitting in the back and taking notes even though women were not officially allowed to study law. She wrote about missing New Mexico, missing the wide open spaces and the clean desert air, and she wrote about missing him. Lucas wrote back, his letters full of ranch news and small observations about life in Red River. He told her about the calves being born, about the new windmill they had built, about the way the sunset looked over the mesas. And he told her he loved her and was waiting for her. The letters became a lifeline for both of them, proof that what they felt was real and lasting. Seasons changed. Summer blazed into fall and fall cooled into winter. Snow dusted the high country, and the cattle clustered around the water sources that were now legally shared. The fence war was over, replaced by an uneasy but functional peace. Lucas turned 25. His father's health began to decline, and Lucas took on more responsibility for running the ranch. He proved himself a capable manager, earning the respect of their neighbors and even, grudgingly, some acknowledgement from the Van der Berg operation. Jessica's letters continued, arriving every few weeks like clockwork. She wrote about the legal texts she was studying, about the women's rights advocates she had met in Boston, about her growing determination to return to New Mexico and use what she was learning to help people. Nearly a year after Jessica's departure, Lucas received a letter that made his heart race. Jessica wrote that her aunt had agreed to help them. There was a way for Jessica to return to New Mexico, but it required careful planning and timing. She asked Lucas to be patient a little longer, to trust that she was working toward their future. Lucas waited, though every day felt like an eternity. Then, on a crisp spring morning 15 months after Jessica had left, a telegram arrived at the ranch. It was brief and to the point. Arriving Red River May 15. Be ready. All my love, Jay. May 15 was 3 days away. Lucas's hands shook as he read the telegram again and again, hardly daring to believe it was real. He spent the next 3 days in a fever of preparation and anticipation. He bathed and shaved, put on his best clothes, and rode into Red River an hour before the stage was due to arrive. He waited in front of the hotel, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. When the stage finally rolled into town, Lucas was already moving toward it. The door opened, and Jessica stepped out, and the world stopped. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. 15 months had transformed her from a girl to a woman. She wore a fashionable traveling suit, and her hair was arranged in the latest Boston style, but her eyes were the same sage green he had dreamed about every night. Their eyes met, and Jessica smiled, a brilliant, joyous smile that lit up her entire face. Lucas crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, lifting her off her feet as he held her close. "You came back," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I promised I would," Jessica said, her arms tight around his neck. He set her down but did not let go, and they stood there holding each other while the town watched and whispered. Lucas did not care. Let them talk. Jessica was back and nothing else mattered. Finally, reluctantly, they stepped apart. Jessica's aunt emerged from the stage, a handsome woman in her 60s with kind eyes and an amused expression. "Aunt Margaret, this is Lucas Vance," Jessica said. "Lucas, my Aunt Margaret Van der Berg Thornton." "Pleased to meet you, madam," Lucas said, removing his hat. "And you, Mr. Vance," Margaret replied. "My niece has spoken of little else but you for the past 15 months. I confess I was curious to meet the young man who inspired such devotion." "Has Van der Berg been informed of your arrival?" Lucas asked Jessica, already dreading the confrontation. "He will find out soon enough," Jessica said. "But Lucas, things have changed. I am not the same person who left here, and I am not asking for my father's permission anymore." There was steel in her voice, a new confidence that took Lucas by surprise. Whatever Jessica had learned in Boston, it had transformed her. "I have rented rooms at the hotel," Margaret said. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." They moved to the hotel, and over lunch in Margaret's suite, Jessica explained her plan. She had studied law and business in Boston, sitting in on lectures and reading every text she could get her hands on. She had also made connections with lawyers and reformers who were interested in Western land rights issues. With Margaret's financial backing, Jessica was going to open a legal advocacy office in Red River, helping small ranchers navigate property disputes and water rights issues. "It is not just about us anymore," Jessica said, her eyes bright with passion. "What happened here with the fence war is happening all over the West. The open range is dying, and small operators are being squeezed out by big ranchers and corporations. Someone needs to fight for them, and I intend to be that someone." Lucas listened in amazement. The woman before him was not just the girl he had fallen in love with. She was a force to be reckoned with, someone who had taken her pain and anger and turned it into purpose. "What does your father say about this?" Lucas asked. "I have not told him yet," Jessica admitted, "but he cannot stop me. I am of legal age and Aunt Margaret is providing the funding. He will be angry, but he will have to accept it." "He will never accept us," Lucas said quietly. "Then he will have to learn to live with disappointment," Jessica said. "Because I am not giving you up, Lucas. Not for him, not for anyone." Margaret smiled. "You should know, Mr. Vance, that my niece gets her stubbornness from our side of the family. When a Van der Berg woman makes up her mind about something, heaven and earth could not change it." "I am beginning to see that," Lucas said, unable to keep the grin off his face. That afternoon they walked through town together, not hiding anymore. People stared and whispered, but Lucas and Jessica held their heads high. They walked to the edge of town and then out into the open country, finally alone. "I missed you every single day," Lucas said, taking her hand. "There were times I thought I would go mad from it." "I missed you too," Jessica said, "but I needed that time, Lucas. I needed to become strong enough to stand up to my father, to be your partner rather than someone you had to protect." "You were always strong," Lucas said. "That is one of the things I love about you." "Love?" Jessica asked, a smile playing at her lips. "Present tense, love," Lucas confirmed. "I never stopped. I never will." Jessica moved into his arms and they kissed under the wide New Mexico sky, no longer stolen moments in shadows but open and unashamed. "Marry me," Lucas said when they broke apart. "I do not have much to offer you, just a small ranch and a lot of hard work and a future that is uncertain. But I love you more than life itself, and I will spend every day proving it to you." "Yes," Jessica said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They sealed the promise with another kiss, and Lucas felt like his heart might burst from happiness. But as expected, Ezra Van der Berg had other ideas. When word reached him that his daughter had returned and was planning to marry Lucas Vance, he rode into town in a fury. Lucas was at the hotel with Jessica and Margaret when Van der Berg stormed in, his face thunderous. "Jessica, we are leaving," he announced. "Whatever madness has taken hold of you, it ends now." "I am not leaving, Father," Jessica said calmly, "and I am not a child you can order about anymore." "You are my daughter, and you will do as I say." "I am a grown woman who has made her own choice," Jessica replied. "I am going to marry Lucas Vance, and I am going to open a legal advocacy office here in Red River. You can accept it or not, but you cannot stop it." Van der Berg turned his glare on Lucas. This is your doing. You have poisoned my daughter's mind against me." "No, sir," Lucas said respectfully but firmly. "Jessica makes her own decisions. All I did was fall in love with an extraordinary woman who happens to be your daughter. She is throwing her life away on a nobody cowboy with a failing ranch," Van der Berg spat. "That is enough." Jessica's voice cracked like a whip. "You will not speak about Lucas that way. He is twice the man you are, Father. He fights for what is right, not just what is profitable. He cares about people, not just property, and he loves me for who I am, not for what I can do for him." Van der Berg looked like he had been slapped. "After everything I have done for you, after the education I gave you, the opportunities." "And I am grateful for the education," Jessica said. "I am using it, just not in the way you intended. I am sorry to disappoint you, Father, but I will not sacrifice my happiness for your pride." Margaret spoke up then, her voice gentle but firm. "Ezra, your daughter has found a good man who loves her and whom she loves. Is that not what every father wants for his child? I want her to marry well, to have security and position, Van der Berg said. She will have love, Margaret replied. Everything else can be built on that foundation. Van der Berg looked at his daughter for a long moment, and Lucas saw the war playing out on his face. Finally, he shook his head. If you do this, if you marry this man, you are no longer my daughter. I will not support you financially or otherwise. Jessica's face went pale, but her voice remained steady. If that is your choice, I accept it. But know that it is your choice, Father. You are the one choosing pride over family. Van der Berg turned and walked out without another word, his back rigid with anger and hurt. Jessica sagged slightly, and Lucas caught her, holding her as she fought back tears. He will come around, Margaret said softly. Give him time, or he will not, Jessica said. Either way, I have made my choice. Over the next weeks, Jessica proved she meant every word. With Margaret's help, she rented a small office in town and hung a sign. Legal advocacy services, water rights, and property disputes. She began taking clients, mostly small ranchers who could not afford the big law firms that men like her father employed. Lucas helped however he could, using his knowledge of the land and the ranching community to support her work. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths. They were married on a Saturday in June, in a simple ceremony at the church in Red River. Michael Vance stood as Lucas's best man, and Margaret gave Jessica away in her father's absence. It was a small gathering, mostly neighbors and friends who supported the match, but it was filled with joy and genuine happiness. Lucas had never forgotten the sight of Jessica walking down the aisle toward him, her face radiant with love and joy. She wore a simple white dress, and she had never been more beautiful. I, Lucas Alexander Vance, take you, Jessica Marie Van der Berg, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, his voice strong and clear. I promise to love you, to honor you, to stand by your side in good times and bad, for as long as we both shall live. I, Jessica Marie Van der Berg, take you, Lucas Alexander Vance, to be my lawfully wedded husband, Jessica replied, her eyes locked on his. I promise to love you, to honor you, to be your partner in all things, for as long as we both shall live. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed his bride with all the love in his heart, and the small congregation erupted in applause. The reception was held at the Vance Ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwoods and music provided by a fiddle player from town. It was not fancy, but it was warm and genuine, filled with people who cared about them. Ezra Van der Berg did not attend, but late in the evening, a wagon arrived from his ranch carrying a large crate. When they opened it, they found a set of fine china and a note in Van der Berg's handwriting. For my daughter, may you use these in good health. Jessica cried when she read it, recognizing it as the closest thing to a blessing her father could give. That night, Lucas and Jessica began their life together in a small house on the Vance Ranch that Michael had helped Lucas build. It was modest, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs. They made love for the first time as husband and wife, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence and passion, learning each other in the warm darkness. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Jessica's head on Lucas's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. Are you happy? Lucas asked. Happier than I have ever been, Jessica said. Are you? More than I ever dreamed possible, Lucas replied. I love you, Jessica Vance. I love you too, Lucas Vance, she said, and kissed him again. The months that followed were not easy. Building a life together while running a ranch and a legal practice required long hours and hard work. Jessica's advocacy office began to thrive as word spread that she was willing to take on cases against the big ranchers. She won several important water rights cases, earning both admiration and enmity. Lucas continued working the ranch with his father, slowly expanding their herd now that they had guaranteed access to water. The peace that Jessica had helped broker held, and slowly the wounds from the fence war began to heal. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Some of the big ranchers saw Jessica as a threat, and there were occasional incidents of vandalism at her office. Lucas made sure she was never there alone after dark, and he taught her to shoot, just in case. Michael's health continued to decline, and in the fall he took ill with pneumonia. Despite Jessica's nursing and the doctor's care, he did not recover. He died on a cold November night with Lucas and Jessica at his bedside. "Take care of the ranch," Michael whispered to Lucas with his last breaths. "Take care of your wife. You are a good man, son. I am proud of you." Lucas grieved deeply for his father, but Jessica was there, holding him through the dark nights and helping him find his way back to the light. They buried Michael on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple marker that read, "Michael James Vance, 1828–1883, a man of the land." The loss drew Lucas and Jessica even closer together. They supported each other through the grief and the challenges, becoming true partners in every sense of the word. In the spring of 1884, Jessica discovered she was pregnant. Lucas was overjoyed, and even Jessica's continuing estrangement from her father could not diminish their happiness. Margaret came to visit when she heard the news, delighted at the prospect of being a great aunt. "Have you told Ezra?" Margaret asked Jessica. "No," Jessica said. "He made his choice. I will not beg for his attention." "Perhaps I will mention it to him," Margaret said thoughtfully. "Sometimes men need to be reminded what truly matters." Jessica's pregnancy progressed well, though she insisted on continuing to work at her office almost until the very end. Lucas fretted and worried, but Jessica was determined to finish the cases she had taken on. Their son was born on a crisp October morning, squalling and healthy. They named him Michael, after Lucas's father, with the middle name of James. Lucas held his son for the first time and felt a love so profound it brought tears to his eyes. "He is perfect," Lucas said, looking at Jessica with wonder. "You are perfect. I do not know what I did to deserve this." "You were yourself," Jessica said, tired but radiant. "That is all you ever needed to be." 2 weeks after Michael James Vance was born, a carriage arrived at their house. Lucas looked out the window and felt his stomach tighten when he recognized Ezra Van der Berg's vehicle. Van der Berg climbed down from the carriage, and for a moment he simply stood there, looking at the small house. Then he walked to the door and knocked. Lucas answered, baby Michael in his arms. Van der Berg's eyes went immediately to the child, and something in his expression softened. "May I come in?" Van der Berg asked gruffly. Lucas stepped aside and Van der Berg entered. Jessica emerged from the bedroom, having heard the knock. Father and daughter faced each other for the first time in nearly 2 years. "Hello, Father," Jessica said quietly. "Jessica," Van der Berg replied. His eyes kept returning to the baby in Lucas's arms. "Margaret told me I have a grandson." "You do," Jessica said. "His name is Michael James Vance." Van der Berg was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I have been a stubborn old fool. Margaret has told me so repeatedly, and she is right. I let my pride cost me my daughter, and I have missed almost 2 years of your life." "You did not miss them," Jessica said. "You chose not to be part of them. There is a difference." "I know," Van der Berg said, "and I am sorry. I thought I was protecting you, saving you from what I saw as a mistake, but I can see now that I was wrong. You have built a good life here. You are happy." "I am very happy," Jessica confirmed. "Lucas is a wonderful husband, and we are partners in every way." Van der Berg turned to Lucas. "I owe you an apology as well, young man. I judged you unfairly and treated you with contempt. You have proven yourself to be a man of character and integrity. You have made my daughter happy, and you have built something worthwhile together." Lucas was so surprised he barely knew what to say. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal." "May I hold my grandson?" Van der Berg asked, his voice almost pleading. Lucas looked at Jessica, who nodded. He carefully transferred the baby to Van der Berg's arms. The older man looked down at the infant, and his eyes filled with tears. "He looks like you did as a baby, Jessica," Van der Berg said. "Same nose, same serious expression." "He has Lucas's eyes," Jessica said, moving to stand beside her father, "and hopefully his temperament. Lucas is the most patient man I have ever known." "He would have to be to put up with a Van der Berg," Van der Berg said with a hint of a smile. They spent the next hour talking, carefully at first and then with growing ease. Van der Berg asked about the ranch and Jessica's legal work. He held his grandson and made awkward but genuine attempts to bridge the gap he had created. When he finally left, he paused at the door. "I would like to visit again, if that would be acceptable. I have missed enough of my daughter's life." "You are welcome any time, Father," Jessica said, and she hugged him, the first time they had embraced in 2 years. After he left, Jessica cried, and Lucas held her and their son, his little family complete and whole. Van der Berg proved true to his word. He visited regularly, gradually building a relationship with Jessica and Lucas and his grandson. It was not easy, and there were still moments of tension, but slowly, grudgingly, he accepted that his daughter had made the right choice. As Michael grew from infant to toddler, the Vance ranch prospered. Lucas and Jessica worked hard, balancing their various responsibilities and supporting each other through challenges and triumphs. Jessica's legal practice continued to grow, and she became known throughout the territory as a fierce advocate for small ranchers and fair water rights. Lucas proved himself a skilled rancher, earning respect even from those who had once doubted him. The agreement that had ended the fence war held strong, becoming a model for other communities dealing with similar conflicts. In the spring of 1887, Jessica discovered she was pregnant again. This time, they welcomed a daughter, whom they named Sarah Margaret, after Jessica's mother who had died when she was young and her beloved aunt. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Lucas would work the ranch during the day while Jessica managed her legal practice and cared for the children. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the land they both loved, planning for the future and marveling at how far they had come. Van der Berg became a doting grandfather, visiting often and even beginning to mentor young Michael, teaching him about ranching and business. The old animosity between Van der Berg and Lucas faded, replaced by mutual respect and, eventually, genuine affection. Margaret returned to Boston eventually, but she visited every summer, delighting in her niece's family and the life they had built. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas and Jessica rode out to the place where they had first confessed their love for each other, leaving the children with Van der Berg for the day. They dismounted and stood looking out over the vast New Mexico landscape, still as beautiful and wild as it had been that first day. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked, putting his arm around his wife. "Everything you gave up to be with me." Jessica leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side. "I did not give anything up. I chose what I wanted most, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times over." "I love you," Lucas said, "more now than even on the day we married." "I love you too," Jessica replied. "You cut through everything to get to me. The fence war, the social barriers, my father's opposition. You cut through it all because you loved me." "I would do it again in a heartbeat," Lucas said. "You were worth every risk, every hardship, every challenge." They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, two people who had fought for their love and won. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Jessica and Lucas had two more children, twin boys they named Thomas and William, born in 1889. Their house grew to accommodate their expanding family, and the ranch prospered under Lucas's careful management. Jessica's legal work eventually led to reforms in territorial water rights law, ensuring that small ranchers would always have access to vital water sources. She became known throughout New Mexico as a pioneering advocate, and young women from across the territory came to study with her, hoping to follow in her footsteps. Lucas served on the Territorial Livestock Association, using his experience with the fence war to help prevent similar conflicts elsewhere. He became known as a voice of reason and compromise, respected by ranchers large and small. Van der Berg, mellowed by age and grandchildren, eventually made peace with all the small ranchers he had once opposed. Before he died in 1895, he divided his vast ranch among his grandchildren, ensuring that Jessica and Lucas's children would be well provided for. Michael Vance grew up to be a skilled rancher like his father, taking over more of the ranch operations as Lucas aged. Sarah became a lawyer, following her mother's footsteps and eventually opening her own practice in Santa Fe. The twins went into business together, starting a freight company that served the growing territory. Lucas and Jessica grew old together, watching their children and eventually their grandchildren grow and thrive. They remained partners in every sense, working together, laughing together, facing challenges together. On a warm summer evening in 1920, when Lucas was 61 and Jessica was 59, they sat on the porch of their home, now expanded to a comfortable ranch house that had seen generations of love and laughter. Their children and grandchildren were gathered for a family celebration, the sound of voices and laughter filling the air. "Did you ever imagine this?" Jessica asked, taking Lucas's hand. "When you first cut those fences all those years ago, did you imagine it would lead to this?" Lucas looked at his wife, still beautiful to him despite the silver in her hair and the lines on her face. "I imagined loving you," he said. "Everything else was just details." "Good details, though," Jessica said with a smile. "The best details," Lucas agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had for 37 years of marriage, watching the sun set over the land that had once divided them and now united them. The fence war that had put them on opposite sides was long over, remembered now only in history books and old stories. But the love that had grown from that conflict remained as strong as ever, a testament to the truth that some things are worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth believing in even when the whole world says it is impossible. Lucas had cut through barbed wire and social barriers and family opposition. But in the end, the only thing he could not cut through, the only thing that remained unbreakable, was his love for Jessica. And that love had built something lasting and beautiful, a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Lucas pulled Jessica close and kissed her temple gently. "I love you, Jessica Vance," he said. "I love you too, Lucas Vance," she replied. "Always and forever." And there, on the porch of the home they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created, they sat in perfect contentment, two souls who had found each other against all odds and had never let go. The fence-cutter war had put them on opposite sides, but Lucas had cut through everything except his love for her. And that love had been enough to build a life, a family, and a legacy that would endure for generations. The end.